Bloomington city leaders hope a new hockey team will help jumpstart activity at its downtown arena.
One of the things that this council has charged us with is really injecting new life into that building.
But don't count on the venue turning a profit anytime soon. You'll hear more just ahead on WGLT's Sound Ideas. Good evening, I'm John Norton. Also on today's show, he was the face of a free healthcare clinic in Normal for 20 years. Now Mike Romanoli is out at the community healthcare clinic. Heartland Community College officially opens its new ag complex, and it's a rare phenomenon, a double dose of cicadas.
Try to appreciate it. I know it's going to be loud, but it is a really cool phenomenon that only happens in this part of the world.
Those stories follow a Bloomington Normal News update just ahead. This is WGLT's Sound Ideas on 89.1 FM and WGLT.org, part of the NPR network.
Support for WGLT comes from Bloomington Normal Audiology. Hear My Story continues with local patient Paul Brandt.
So I just went without them for all those years. I talked to somebody who had recently gotten hearing aids and talked about the fact that they were connected to the TV. And so that kind of prompted me to try it again.
Paul's full story can be found at bnaudiology.com.
From the campus of Illinois State University in Normal, this is WGLT's news magazine, Sound Ideas. I'm John Norton. A free healthcare clinic in Normal, largely dedicated to serving the uninsured, is looking for a new leader. Its executive director for the last 2 decades has resigned. WGLT's Melissa Ellen has more.
For 30 years and through months of uncertainty following a loss of nonprofit status, the community healthcare clinic in Normal has persisted. It's continuing to provide free healthcare services to a largely uninsured population and plans to keep doing so. For the last 20 years, Mike Romanoli has led the clinic. Romanoli is now gone. He resigned Friday to pursue a new opportunity. This, according to a news release from the clinic. Board President Jamie Matthey says the departure wasn't a shock, and an interim is already in place.
It was something that we had been setting things up for a little while on, and, Mike did a bunch of amazing things for the clinic, and we're absolutely overjoyed for his prospects for the future.
Last year, the clinic lost its nonprofit status with the IRS after failing to file the proper tax forms for 3 consecutive years. Losing tax-exempt status can put a nonprofit's funding in jeopardy. Before he left, Matthey says Romanoli was able to find and file paperwork to the IRS that would get the clinic reinstated as a nonprofit.
We're happy that part got done, and now we're just waiting. The IRS is not a fast-moving entity.
Matthey says the clinic has continued providing all of its usual services since Romanoli departed. This includes programs like the dental clinic and mental health counseling that the former executive director pioneered. Sonia Reese, who serves on the McLean County Board of Health, has temporarily taken over to keep things moving. Reese also served as an interim executive director for a stint in 2002, when the organization was in a similar situation. She says it's been an adjustment. In the past 2 decades, everything has been transitioned to a digital platform, but she's been adapting. She's already got a priority list going. Reese says filling open positions ranks high. The clinic is currently short a nurse and will require part-time pharmacists from March when the full-time pharmacist is away. As for who will take over as permanent executive director of the clinic, board president Jamie Matthey says the search is in progress. Applications haven't launched yet, but he'd love to fill the role soon. Better yet, in the next 90 days.
There's a lot of competition for good candidates for every profession, every job role in the medical field right now. And, I don't know if that's realistic, but that's my perfect world, right?
Interim executive director Sonia Reese says she won't be applying.
There's lots of good people in this community that can do this.
In the meantime, a language services void has opened at the clinic. Romanoli and the nurse who left in December were 2 of 5 total clinic staff who speak Spanish. Most of the clinic clientele are Spanish-speaking. Matthey says the clinic is interested in having English and Spanish speakers assume the open roles, but it won't be a requirement. Matthey says there are other tools the clinic can use to bridge the language barrier gap as well, including translation services and the pursuit of volunteers with secondary language knowledge. I'm Melissa Ellen.
Melissa Ellen covers mental health as a Report for America Corps member. Report for America places journalists in local newsrooms across the nation to cover underreported topics.
Support for WGLT mental health coverage comes from Report for America and Chestnut Health Systems, caring for the community's physical and mental health and celebrating 50 years of service.
This is Sound Ideas on WGLT. Heartland Community College cut the ribbon today on its new $23 million agriculture complex. WGLT's Lauren Warnicki has more.
The nearly 30,000 square foot facility is located on the west side of the Heartland campus in Northwest Normal. Heartland College President Keith Corneal says it was a long time coming.
6 years ago when I first came to the area and I talked with the board, one of our objectives and our dreams was to create a complex that was from the board side of things. They said we need to expand into ag because we had nothing sitting right here in some of the richest farmland in the world.
The McLean County Farm Bureau was one of the donors on the project. Its name adorns one of the new learning spaces called the Agriculture Lab. Here's Farm Bureau President Mike Swartz.
It's an investment getting kids into the pipeline who may not have made that decision or looking for certificates to advance them directly into a career. But it is a path, it is a pipeline in which students will be able to actively get engaged in agriculture.
The Ag Complex is expected to serve 200 credit program students at Heartland every year. One of them is freshman Lauren Monk, who attended Wednesday's ribbon cutting and is working toward a 4-year degree in ag education.
I think one of the biggest things is being able to get as many credits completed as possible before transferring, especially trying to stay on campus as long as possible. I love it here on campus, especially with the new ag building. I mean, that's phenomenal.
The Ag Complex aims to be net zero, consuming as little energy as possible while also generating energy on site. That includes a large rooftop solar array. I'm Lauren Warnicki.
You can see an aerial tour of the new Ag Complex at WGLT.org.
Chef Carla Hall thinks food does more than fill your belly. It connects you to memories and history. The backstories of some of the foods you love most, tomorrow on Morning Edition from NPR News.
Wake up with Morning Edition, tomorrow morning on 89.1 WGLT.
Stories and conversations around Bloomington, Normal, and McLean County. This is WGLT's Sound Ideas. I'm John Norton. Bloomington city officials say a new hockey team is just one step of many they see pumping new life into the city's downtown arena. The city took over management of the arena during the pandemic when all entertainment venues were shut down. Bloomington Deputy City Manager Billy Tyus tells WGLT's Eric Stock the owners of the Bloomington Bison, Indianapolis-based Hallett Sports, will bring a lot more than just hockey to the community. They'll bring entertainment that will have broader appeal.
It's the next in a string of things happening at the arena. You know, one of the things that this council has charged us with is really injecting new life into that building. So as we've brought operations in-house, we've been doing a lot of work, Anthony Nelson and his team and others, to really inject new life into the arena. And so this is the next in a string of things that we've seen happening over the last year and a half, and more to come. So, yeah, we're excited.
And, of course, the city has had several hockey teams in the past, going back a number of years. None of them lasted more than several years. How will the city define success in this arrangement, and what is your expectation that this will be different?
I think to some degree we will know it for sure when we see it. Of course, the numbers will matter, and attendance and sales, and they're meeting standards, all of which we've built into the agreement with them. There will be performance standards, but that's at a minimum. You know, I think that this community is not shy about sharing how they feel about something. And I think that as the tide starts to turn with that building and as they get to know this team and this organization, we'll sense a feel for, what we're hearing from people. And that will be just as important in terms of how we're measuring success with this organization and the hockey team.
So the agreement that you had alluded to had called for a benchmark of 2,200 fans per game. What if the ownership group fails to meet that?
Well, one of the things that we've learned from past experiences, as you referenced, is the need to build in performance standards, but also opportunities for the organization to fix those things. And so there are, as you said, there is a minimum standard of 2,200 people per game, attendees per game, but also a minimum of $20,000 in food and beverage sales on average per game. So if the team is not able to meet that, it calls for them to, on the food and beverage side, to be able to pay a portion of the difference in order to make up the gap. I think it's 70% of the difference under the $20,000. On the attendance side, they would have to come forward with a plan for addressing attendance. And at the end of the day, if they don't meet those standards or they're not able to make those adjustments, we can hold them in default and we can default the agreement. And so we don't want to do that, obviously, and we for sure don't think we'll get there, because they're very confident that they can meet the attendance standards and the food and beverage standards based on their experience, both in other markets and what they've seen in other places.
In fact, the owners have said they anticipate 4,500 fans per game, about double the minimum. They say that's based on the average that they see in the ECHL, of which they were a part. Is it fair to compare Bloomington Normal with other markets in the ECHL, which are predominantly much bigger?
I think it's absolutely a fair comparison, and I think that based on what we've seen in the couple of weeks since we've announced that, I don't think they'll have an issue meeting those standards. Attendance isn't just about the size of your market. It's about the passion of the fans who exist here. And what we've seen even before this announcement in terms of requests from the hockey community, there is a very passionate community here who has been looking for something like this. The other thing I'll say is that based on the 2 weeks since there was an announcement, they have seen more than 400 requests or 400 applications for season tickets. And so, that's a lot of season tickets in the course of just a week. And so if that's any indicator, they won't have any problem meeting those standards.
And how do the city and the Bison, as they're going to be called, come up with the profit estimate of $20 million over 20 years?
Well, I want to clarify. We've never said it would be $20 million over 20 years. What we've said is that we're estimating roughly $750,000 per year in profit based on revenues and estimated expenses. Now, those are estimates based on, so for example, average costs or average expenditures for people at sporting events of this type, and revenues based on what we think, including rents, but also expenditures, like I just said, for food and beverage, for what people spend on hot dogs and beer and those kinds of things as well. They were based on averages and on experiences from other places. Now, having said that, we believe we'll meet those standards, but they're estimates. So at those levels, that was what we based our estimates on. The other thing I want to mention is the fact that, there will be a $1.50 per ticket fee attached to ticket sales, which will go towards arena maintenance. It's not a new building, and there are upgrades and maintenance items that will need to happen, not for hockey by itself, but throughout the building. Every year we spend money on maintenance. That's not figured into the profit estimate that we've given.
And as we continue on Sound Ideas with Billy Tyus, Deputy City Manager for the City of Bloomington. So the arena has hosted other sports besides hockey. There was indoor football for a number of years. Bloomington had a minor league basketball team. For a brief time, the arena has hosted high school basketball, the Stay From Holiday Classic, some postseason events. Are there discussions to bringing any or all of those back in some way?
Absolutely, and we're open. One of the things that we've been able to do by bringing arts and entertainment in-house under the direction of Anthony Nelson, who's the director of our Arts and Entertainment Department, is to make sure that we're being very, very aggressive in recruitment of events. Both those that you've mentioned, but also others. We want to make sure that there's a large number of events, but also a diversity of events that appeal to a wide variety of audiences. And we're starting to see that, frankly. One of the things that I'm telling people, like in the next month or so, we're going to see 30,000 people through the doors of the arena for events that have been planned. Both, IHSA, there are 3 events planned. I think there's wrestling and dance and cheer. That they have a very large fan base that come, to those events. We've got a hockey game planned. We've got other events planned, and literally 30,000 people is not a small number. And so, we're excited about that and about where things are going. In the last 3 months, we've had a couple of shows that have been sellouts or near sellouts. We've had shows back in April that were profitable. So we're moving the needle in the building. There's still a lot of work to do, but we're definitely moving the needle.
With the city potentially getting up to $1 million a year from this hockey team that will be in town for who knows how long, but the agreement is for up to 20 years. Going back to the last 12 months pre-COVID, the last time there were regular events at the arena had a net operating loss of about $370,000. Do you anticipate now having a full-time hockey tenant back in there will get the arena out of the operating red?
Well, arenas across the country, honestly, and I hate to say it, typically don't make a profit. They're not designed to do so. However, one of our goals is to, for sure, reduce the amount of the operating deficit. I would love for that building to be profitable. But, the reality of the situation is that doesn't often happen. But we're making a go of it. I will tell you, it would be a goal of us to at least to get to break even. And we're working towards that. But again, I don't want to set a standard that's unattainable because there are other things that go into the operations of a building like that day to day where, you're not having events every day. So it's a difficult thing to do.
That was Bloomington Deputy City Manager Billy Tyus speaking with WGLT's Eric Stock. Tyus says the city has a revenue-sharing agreement with the Hockey Ownership Group for arena naming rights to replace Grossinger Motors. That earlier agreement has lapsed. Our final story on Sound Ideas today, it's about a phenomenon that only happens about once every 200 plus years. Cicadas, those noisy bugs that emerge from the ground about every decade or so, will have twice the force this year in central Illinois. Casey Athey is the specialty crops entomologist at the University of Illinois. In this interview with WGLT student reporter Megan Sperline, Athey says central Illinois is one place where 2 cicada broods will be buzzing around at about the same time, starting in May.
The broods very rarely emerge simultaneously because of that strange year. So 13 years and 17 years, if they come out together, it's going to take a long time for them to sync up with another one in the same area. So we actually have 15 broods of these cicadas in the U.S. And in a lot of years, some part of the U.S. will see an emergence of periodical cicadas. But because of their weird time of coming out, you just rarely get 2 of them that will sync up together.
Yeah, what are the 2 specific broods that are emerging simultaneously this
year? So here, this year, it's the Northern Illinois brood is what it's actually called, and the Great Southern brood as well are the 2 that we'll be seeing this year.
How many should we be expecting?
Yeah, so a lot of the estimates I've seen are billions with a B. And so a lot, I suppose you could say.
What's the specific timeline? Like, how long will they be staying above ground?
Yeah, so periodical cicadas are interesting. All cicadas are like this in that they're really long-lived underground. And when they actually come out, they don't live very long. So, a couple of weeks, maybe a month. Here in Illinois, you'll see them probably earlier in the year come out, or earlier in the month of May. So we should expect that mid to late May we'll start to see them, and they'll be coming out through probably mid-June.
Is there a benefit to having the cicadas around?
Well, it depends on who you ask. So if you ask me, I would say it's a super cool phenomenon that doesn't happen anywhere else on the planet, and they're cool animals. If you ask predatory birds and lizards and other bugs, they would say, wow, that's a lot of food all at once. To humans, other than the appreciation of something, cool ecologically coming out, they're not necessarily beneficial. And outside of the, wow, that's a lot of bugs, for most people, they're also not harmful, although there are caveats to that as well.
Could you elaborate what you mean by that?
I can. Yeah, so the only damage that periodical cicadas do is to young trees. So when the periodical cicadas come out, they're coming out to mate and lay eggs. And when they lay eggs, they actually use this little saw-like egg-laying device, and they cut into small twigs and lay their eggs in there. And so and they do this with trees. And if you're a big, mature tree, no big deal. If it's a tiny tree, they can damage that tree or, at worst, kill it. So if you're a homeowner who's just planted, let's say, a brand new dogwood tree last year in their yard, small tree, you may want to take basically a large mesh bag, put it around your tree, and then make sure that you tie it off at the bottom so that the cicadas can't crawl up there. If you're an orchard owner and you have a lot of small trees, then there are other control things that you have to do. And I talk to growers about this as well. That's actually when we control for periodical cicadas. But for your average homeowner, there's nothing that you need to worry about. There's nothing that you need to do other than it's going to be loud.
So the damage that they do to like smaller trees, is there any way to kind of reverse that? Or is it like once it's done, it's done?
I don't know for sure. I would say you want to avoid it. And so because we know when they come out, and because the mesh will prevent them from doing the type of damage, generally speaking, that we're worried about, I would say that we don't necessarily worry about reversing, because depending on how many of those small twigs it gets, there's nothing you can really do to fix that problem for the tree.
So you mentioned they're not harmful to humans in any way. Is there any way that they're harmful to like pets or?
Nope. Okay. Nope. Not at all. They don't bite. They don't, have a stinger or anything. If your pets ate them, that would also be fine. Like, it's not going to be any kind of an issue as far as that goes.
And if the number of cicadas becomes too much, is there any way they can be managed?
So they don't really need to be managed, again, aside from if you are an orchard owner, right? So if you have a lot of small trees, then you do have to actually prepare for the cicadas. But generally speaking, they're not going to cause any harm. Again, they're going to be loud, but there's really no need to control for them because they're not doing any, sort of ecological damage or damage otherwise, I suppose.
Yeah. Should they be like sprayed with repellents or anything? Is there like any harm in that if somebody were to do that?
Well, I think the thing here is that the cicadas don't care about us. And so the loudness is happening and they're in trees trying to mate, but they're not generally insects that are going to be trying to fly into your face or anything like that. And so really there isn't anything to be done because they won't, generally speaking, be trying to bother you. You can think of it as, if you think of our regular cicadas, how often anyone ever actually gets one of those sort of on them. Yes, there will be a lot more, but their behavior is very similar to the ones that we deal with every year.
That was entomologist Casey Athey from the University of Illinois with WGLT student reporter Megan Spurline. And that's Sound Ideas today. WGLT's news magazine is made possible in part by Bloomington Normal Audiology. I'm John Norton. Story help today from WGLT's Melissa Ellen, Lauren Warnicki, and Eric Stock. You also heard from student reporter Megan Spurline. It's our student producer, Ryan Toohey, who edits Sound Ideas. This is 89.1 WGLT and WGLT.org, part of the NPR network.